Tony Walby, I heard you're making a comeback to judo competition. But before we get there, the last time I spoke with you was back in October 2020. That's exactly 2 years ago. We spoke about judo during the pandemic. And now it's October 2022. COVID is still around, but life is back to normal somewhat. I guess I should welcome you to the show first and foremost. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
It's great having you back. I've interviewed you so many times, and I'm really curious to know more about your return to competition. But I have one big question for you to start it off, and that is, how do you think the last 2 years of the pandemic have impacted the Canadian judo ecosystem, the community, particularly at the local club level here in Ontario? In your opinion, what has the community learned from this experience?
So if we're talking the local Ottawa community, the clubs have been actually pretty strong. 3 of the biggest clubs in Ontario during the pandemic were here in Ottawa. The Almont Judo Club actually was closed for the full pandemic, but they kept their membership roster and all of their members retained membership within Judo Ontario and were the largest club in Ontario during the pandemic. Takahashi Dojo was the second largest club, and then the Ottawa Judo Club with Brian Kelson was the third. Now, the Takahashi Dojo, my club, and the Ottawa Judo Club did open during the pandemic, and we spoke about that a few years ago, how we had to put into a lot of restrictions and that, but we were able to keep a lot of members going and recruited a few new members. And now that the pandemic is not over, but judo is back to normal, and our membership roster is way up. Our classes are packed. I'm getting 20 to 25 adults on the mat on a regular class.
Wow.
We're getting over 20 kids per kids class. Our instructors are back. Tournaments are back. It is phenomenal to see, and the community is just as strong as it always has been. And I think it's growing a bit stronger because the kids are missing that. The parents are missing the kids having the physical contact, and the kids are missing that ability to wrestle and roughhouse and be part of a community like hockey or judo. And now that hockey's back and my kids are in hockey and judo is back, sports are in full swing in Ottawa here.
Right on. In terms of, and it's great to hear that positive news. I'm just curious to know, what have we learned from this experience overall, the last 2 years? Is there something in particular that you took away?
Well, I think what we've learned at our club the most is that we can adapt. We don't have to shut down. We don't have to stop judo every time there's an outbreak. We can transition to solo training. We can transition to throwing dummy training. We can transition to limited contact group training. And we did all of that. And we've learned that we can do this very quickly, very easily, and keep our members trained, in shape, ready to compete. I think and during the pandemic, we've also learned that we can also prepare for international competition as our Kata teams did. And we can prepare for not only Yadansha black belt grading, but for high dan grading. So during the pandemic, and a year ago in September 2021, I was promoted to Rokudan. So we had to, during the COVID training, we had to prepare for a high dan grading for myself. And I became the first blind Canadian to receive a 6th-degree black belt. And it was not an easy task because we had to do that during the pandemic. So we've learned that we can adapt and do anything.
That's incredible. Congratulations to you on that achievement and promotion. Curious to know, like, since 2020, you and Alan Takahashi, you've been competing in tournaments, kata tournaments in Belgium and Italy, as well as the World Championships last year in Portugal, as well as this year in Poland. So you've been quite busy. Give us a summary of your experience at these tournaments, particularly focusing on the World Championships, And tell us about the training and preparation along with working with Alan Takahashi.
So the World Championships, the first one in 2021 was phenomenal. I became the first blind judoka to ever compete at the World Kata Championships. So that was quite an honor, and IGF made a pretty big deal about that, and that was really nice of them. And it came right at the time of Disability Week in the world. So it was phenomenal for me to do that, and it's a lot of training for Alan Takahashi and myself. He since I can't see to attack him, we have to time everything out in steps and position. And after every attack, there's a reaction by him. It's either a throw or it's an arm lock, and we're dragged out of that center line. So I then have to find my way back via steps to the center line. And it's all done through being consistently in the same spot every single time and coming back to those markers. And it takes a lot of work of just lining up and counting the steps and being very consistent in our actions. So if one of us is off by just a little bit, we end up way out of whack, and I have to try to work my way back, and that loses a lot of points. And so we've been really, really consistent on our positioning, on our kata as a whole. So we competed in 2020 in Belgium in a different kata, in Kimono Kata. And then we competed virtually in the Italian tournament in Kimono Kata in that same year after COVID had hit. We did it via video. And then in 2021, we competed in Kodokan Goshin Jitsu at the 2021 World Championships in Portugal. And then again, we competed at the National Championships in Kodokan Goshin Jitsu. And we won the national championships and were selected to compete in Poland last month. And that was quite the experience as well. We had a bit more confidence in our abilities now. And we're actually competing in a week and a half in Duncan Vignali's Vignali Classic in Kingston. And then again at Ontario Open in November. And then we're off to Belgium again in February for kata. So it's a mixture right now of me training with Alan 2 to 3 times a week kata, me coaching my competitors and my athletes a couple of times a week, and at the same time coaching, training and preparing to compete in Shiai again. So the judo world is for me is very, very busy, but I find that the kata training has really focused me to be a little bit more technical, to enjoy judo a little bit more than if I'm just training all out hard for Shiai. The kata allows me to have fun on the mat.
Very interesting. And the IJF did publish a really good article last year in regards to the 2021 World Championships. It was featured. It was featuring you, and anyone who's interested in reading it should check it out. Great article. You just made an interesting point in regards to why you decided to, or comparing between the competition judo and the kata. And my next question was just that. I was going to ask you, why did you decide to compete in kata? And more importantly, in addition to that, how would you communicate the value and relevance of judo kata to the general public, and particularly to those who might not be familiar with it?
Okay. So I'll back up a second and go to the first part of your question. How did I get into competing in kata? So there was a grading syllabus for high ranks for the grading I was going for. I had to, at the time back in 2020, the syllabus said I had to do a kata called Kimono Kata. So Alan was going to be my partner for grading. So Alan and I started practicing it a couple of times a week to prepare me for my grading. And then we decided, well, let's see how good we are. We went to a tournament in Toronto, the Ontario Open in 2019, and we won that tournament. And then we went off to Belgium and we did okay in Belgium. And then a new syllabus came out in January of 2020 that said, oh, you don't have to do, sorry, in 2021, the new syllabus came out in January of 2021. It came out, you don't have to do Kimono Kata anymore. You need to do Kodokan Goshinjutsu and Izutsu no Kata. So then Alan and I started training those two katas, and we just prior to my grading, one of the national grading committee over Zoom was critiquing my kata so that we could make any last minute changes before the grading, and said we should apply to compete at the World Championships in Goshinjutsu because for that year there was no qualification for Canada because we could not run a nationals, that we did, pretty much any team that put their name in was going to be able to go. So Alan and I put our name in, and we went off to Portugal and did a really good job placing 12th of 17 teams there. But we were able to go to my grading and at the grading, again, be able to perform at a very high level. Actually, Sensei Nakamura, a ninth degree in Canada, was the center judge at my grading, and it was nice to perform those katas in front of him. He's one of Canada's foremost experts on pretty much anything in judo, but kata especially. So how would I describe kata to the general public? Different than karate katas or taekwondo katas that are usually done solo, all of the judo katas are done with a partner. There are 5 competitive katas, though there are more katas in judo. The 5 competitive katas are Katami no kata, which is a groundwork kata, and clubmates of mine, Shane Rooney and Bailey Hugh, at this year's World Championships won a bronze medal in that kata.
Right.
Naga no kata, which is the forms of throwing. So there's 15 different throws being demonstrated in that kata, left and right. Then there is Juno kata, which is more of a classical forms of technique without any throwing. There's a lot of lifts and movements, and it's very, I would say it's more akin to a dance, but it is so technical and so beautiful to watch. It's mesmerizing. There is Kimi no kata, which is a weapons kata that combines the 8 moves on the ground, 5 without weapons, 3 with weapons, and then another 12 moves standing that have 9 techniques without weapons, and then 3 more techniques with weapons. Sorry, 4 techniques of weapons, so 8 techniques without weapons and 4 techniques with weapons. That kata has a dagger and a long sword. And then there's Kodokan Goshinjutsu, which has 21 techniques, and the first 12 are attacks without weapons, and then the last 9 are 3 with a knife, 3 with a stick, and 3 with a gun. So they're very exciting. They're more dynamic katas than the flashy ones because you're using weapons, and I gravitate towards them because, again, I get to attack somebody with a weapon. But that's how I would explain them to non-judo people. There are other katas in judo that are not competitive katas, like the one I mentioned earlier for my Haidan, which is called Izutsu no kata. This kata is made up of 5 techniques, and it's based on different, I would almost say different elements. The first technique is you're supposed to be pushing over a stone statue. And the second technique, you are heaving a piece of wood, a log along the ground. And the third technique, you rise up in as a phoenix, as fire, and defeat your opponent. And then you're a tidal wave. And then the last technique, you have an irresistible force meets immovable object, and it's been known as the mystical kata in some circles, but it's a very, very technical and beautiful kata to watch, but it's a non-competitive kata. So I like to do these katas now. As a competitor a long time ago, I did not like to do kata. I always thought it took away from competing. And this goes into your next question of what benefit does it give the competitors? And
right.
What I'm finding now, and I wish I knew this a long time ago, but I guess with age comes some wisdom. The mental training that goes into being a high performance kata competitor is very akin to being the mental training of a Shiai competitor, and it's just a little bit more relaxing than a Shiai competitor, whereas you get to do all that same mental training, but you don't have as much of the angst as you do as a competitor. So I'm finding that I'm actually being more mentally focused now as I train on the Shiai, the fighting side of it. I'm a little bit more focused, a little bit more goal oriented, just a little bit more strategic than I was in the past. And on the kata side, I'm doing just as much training as I do on the shiai side. And on the mat, off the mat, the video analysis, the mental focus, it's all very similar training. And I'm finding that being able to do both of those trainings allows me to have more joy in judo, feel like a more complete judoka. I'm actually starting to feel like I've earned the red and white belt I'm wearing now. But it brings some enjoyment to me being on the mat for kata, and then again being able to still go out and do that shiai, that hard randori fighting that I do. So it's a balance, and I'm really enjoying myself.
Right on. Very interesting as you're speaking about how you find there's many benefits in terms of being able to focus, and you're tapping into that now. Have you recommended to any of your students, the ones who are doing competition as far as tournaments, have you been guiding them towards that, or kind of introducing it to them from this newfound perspective?
It's actually funny you bring this question up. So our club is known for many years as being a very high performance fighting club. Lately, we're known as being a very high performance kata club. We have people travel from Toronto, Montreal to come and train with us to help prepare for some of their grading. So, but just a few weeks ago, the Ontario Kata Championships occurred, and during that competition, there's an exemption portion for brown belts wishing to get a kata exemption during their grading. What that means is when it comes time for them to grade, they will have to do the rest of the grading, but not the kata portion, if they get their exemption at this tournament. So two of my students, my fighters, went down to this tournament and did their Nagano kata, and which is what's necessary to get your first degree black belt, and they got their exemptions. And now one of them came back and is training for competitive Nagano kata, and he'll compete at the Ontario Open in competitive Nagano kata and in the shiai fighting side of it. So it does really focus them in on going, oh, there is these other benefits to just fighting. And judo is one of the hardest martial arts in the world to get a black belt in, mainly because you have to go in front of a grading board. And even with the new syllabus that's out that has a competitor stream, where if a competitor wins, as a brown belt, wins 10 matches in 5 specified tournaments, so the 5 national level tournaments, the 5 hardest tournaments in the country, if they win a combined 10 matches, then they can go to a technical clinic and be promoted. Fighters are finding that it's much more difficult than it looks on paper. Like, it sounds so good on paper. All I have to do is win 10 matches in these 5 tournaments, but it's turning out that it could take 2-3 years to win those 10 matches, just because the level of competition in Canada. So there's other routes and other avenues to that black belt, which is the actual going to the grading. And by going to the grading, you need to do your kata, your technique, and the like. So we're having more of our fighters train maybe once every 2 weeks at kata, and then 4 or 5 times a week at the shiai training. So every once in a while, we're getting them out on the kata night, and they're doing the kata as well, because they're looking at that avenue that if they don't get their 10 wins in 6 months or 1 year, that they'll do that grading at 1 year, get their black belt, and still be able to focus on shiai. So they're seeing the benefit in it, and we have some young competitors in the kata. We have some 15 and 16-year-olds. We had junior national champions this year in Kodokan Goshinjutsu as well, and they're doing really well, and they're competing, and they're loving to compete in the kata, because they don't like to fight. They didn't want to do the sparring and the randori side of judo, the shiai side of judo. They want to learn the techniques and do the technical side of judo and the kata side. So it shows the different avenues to a black belt, and the different facets of judo, because not everybody is going to be a fighter, and it allows people in judo to join judo at any age and still have that goal of becoming a black belt and achieving that goal, because you don't have to be a fighter, and judo doesn't end when you're done competing.
It's also making it, as you mentioned, very accessible to people, right? Because it's not just this assumption, as you mentioned, that one has to fight to be exactly. But I wanted to know, is there, and these are very general questions, so some people are probably shaking their head, but I'll ask either way. In terms of like, are people looking at a judo black belt who is a competitor? Would they look at this person differently than one who is not a non-competitor, but
actually
competes?
You know what? That's not a very general question, because in the past, in the 80s and 90s, and 80s and 90s, I mean, competitors were like that revered, right? Like judo is to be, you're to come, you're to fight, but we're finding now that like people are starting to understand what the black belt means, and the black belt's not an end, it's a beginning. But they're starting to understand that the ranks within the black belt and all the way up, what they mean is knowledge. They don't mean your proficiency as a fighter, because as you know, and as many other people that watch your different martial art topics on the show know, that there's some fighters out there that only know one judo technique, and they're so proficient in it that they win on it every single time, and they're just phenomenal athletes and phenomenal fighters, but are they very knowledgeable in judo? And you'd have to say no. You'd have to say they're very, very good at that one thing that they do, but they're not knowledgeable judoka, and they're not going to become high-level judo instructors, but they were these fantastic fighters. So I think now those fantastic fighters are still revered, and they're still, we look up to them as our sports heroes and as our champions in the fighting world. But when we want to get better as a fighter, and we want to get better as a judoka, we are still going to the high-level instructors that may or may not have been competitors in the past, but are very proficient in their technique and their knowledge.
Very, very interesting. And I'm sure we could probably stick to this topic for an hour, but I do want to ask just a follow-up, because there's so many different sports combat sports out there, and people read various information on this concept of a belt, of a rank, and it means a lot to a lot of people, right? To get a black belt. I guess just an open general question: what does a black belt mean in judo? And I guess we can't compare it to other sports here, because the focus here is judo. But in plain language, tell us, what does that belt actually mean if someone is awarded a black belt?
So to a lot of people in judo, because like it is a very difficult thing to attain. You spend on average 5-6 years moving up through what we call Madunsha ranks, white, yellow, orange, green, blue, and brown, before you get that opportunity, or you meet the requirements to go for your black belt, and then you go for your black belt. So to a lot of people, I would say the majority of people in judo, it's an achievement. It shows that they've met that baseline knowledge. But to high-level instructors that instruct those black belts, we try to instill upon them that it's the beginning of the journey and not the end of the journey, because what it means is now you've reached this level where you can now explore more difficult, complex, not only techniques, but katas, concepts, instruction. You get to pass on some of the knowledge you've gained, but then you also get a chance to gain more advanced knowledge that is usually not taught to the lower belts because of the complexity of it, and it's not techniques that are in tournaments. Some of these techniques are banned. It's not katas that are competitive, or in a lot of cases it is the competitive katas, but they're not taught because the primary kata for your black belt is called negano kata, the forms of throwing. And we try to, because it's a very difficult kata to do, 15 techniques, right and left, so 30 different 15 throws, but 30 times, it's a very, very difficult kata to get through. So we focus on that throughout all the colored belts until they get to their shodan. And then when they're done that, then we start focusing on some of those other more complex and more in-depth katas, as well as techniques. So though it means a lot, we try to push onto them that it's the beginning and not the goal. The goal is to lifetime learning. And judo, in my opinion, judo is one of the few combat sports that you can continue to do at a very active level, straight through your 80s and into your 90s. There are a number of instructors in Ontario that are consistently on the mat in their mid 80s, late 80s, and 90s, including a couple at our club. My kata instructor, though, Brian Matani, if he watches this, I know you're not 80 yet, but you're closing in on it. And he's on the mat with us every week, correcting us, helping us, ensuring that we hit that high level international standard for our kata. Sensei June, who is 89 years old, is in her gi and on the mat with us every day. Now, she's not doing a whole lot because she has some mobility issues, but she is there and she is giving us her wisdom and correction every single day on the mat. Sensei Bill Doherty out of Toronto is 90 years old, and I know he teaches 3 times a week. Sensei Nakamura is in his 80s, a 9th degree, the head instructor at Judo Pan in Montreal, and he is on the mat every single day. So I can go through a whole lot longer list, but in my opinion, it's one of the very few combat martial arts or combat sports where you can have somebody on the mat their whole life.
That's incredible. That really is truly incredible. And you know, there was a few points there that you made that I think within this sort of information space when it comes to combat sports, not just judo, of course, but all combat sports, group grappling or striking based or mixed styles, etc. We don't necessarily, unless you're within this information bubble, you know, you're familiar with this stuff, right? You're familiar with this with these concepts, the history and the value. But I almost like, from as someone who, you know, who reads about other combat sports, I'm a fan of other combat sports, of course, as you are, I would imagine. You know, you don't hear much about these points you've articulated, right? In terms of this whole comprehensive value to the sport, as you mentioned, this lifelong learning that goes beyond just, here you go, you've got your black belt. You know, it's a journey, right? It's a process, and there are many layers to it. And as you mentioned, some of these individuals who've been involved in this sport, they've been involved in the sport their entire lives, and now they're up in age in their 80s and 90s, right? It's remarkable to hear that. And I guess the reason why I'm saying this is, you know, there's more focus on just, you know, giving someone a uranagi or an arm bar and you know what I'm saying, like an ippon or a knockout in boxing, is that we're all fans of that, but sometimes we probably get lost in that in that aspect of the sport, just like a home run in baseball, as opposed to the science of baseball and the principles of the sport. So it's interesting that judo has kept this tradition, you know, and these core values. And I guess my point is, I kind of wish this sort of information was more. It's not that it's not accessible, obviously it is, but I don't think there's enough content out there that kind of pushes that out. Do you know what I'm saying? It seems like
it is changing. It is changing. Judo Ontario has created a communications working group that is actually communicating press releases on the different things that are going on, the different, like just yesterday, Judo Ontario, for the very first time ever, awarded a new award called the Legacy Award. And it was awarded to the Takahashi family on behalf, or for Mas Takashi, who passed away in 2020. But this legacy award is all about what you've done for the sport of judo, and it's that exact same thing. Have you brought your values, and how many people have you instilled these values on? How many black belts have you brought through the sport, and what have you done to make the sport bigger and better, and continue on with the base principles of judo? And the very number one is mutual welfare and benefit. And judo is in my opinion, such a community and such a family. Everybody is so close. We had yesterday. We had a celebration of life for Masato Takashi, who was an 8th degree black belt and a pioneer in judo in Canada. And yesterday at this gathering, there was well over 100 people from all across Canada that came and joined. But at this event, there was 19 high dans, 8 of them that were red and white belts and 1 red belt. And it was just to see that much knowledge of judo in one place at one time is phenomenal. And to hear some of the stories of just how big judo is in the hearts of all of these people. And I'm certain this is true for every martial art and every combat martial art. And I'm sure there are stories like this from every martial art. And I'm sure that somebody in karate or taekwondo is going to see this and send you a note and go, no, in my sport, we have 80-year-olds too who instill their knowledge in that as well. And I'm certain that is the case. I just, from what I see within the martial arts community, and I do get to see the whole, well, yes, pun intended, I'm a blind person, but I do get to see the whole martial arts community, whether it be Aikido or Aikido or Kendo or Judo, as well as Jiu-Jitsu, BJJ, and MMA. Mm-hmm. I do see that within Judo, there is more of a long-standing commitment with their members. We have lifelong members that are there consistently, and it's phenomenal that we have these families. And yes, mine as well. My kids are on the mat, but we have these 3, 4, 5 generations worth of families that are constantly still doing judo, and they're there, and it's just amazing. And I don't see that in the other martial arts. I do see those that have been in the martial art for a very, very long time, but I don't see the legacies. I don't see the 4th and 5th generations of the same family and multiple families doing that. And that I know in other countries that's huge. If we go to Asia, that's commonplace in Korea, Japan, China, Mongolia, but in North America, it's not so commonplace. But in judo, it is, and it is kind of remarkable, and it shows that the values that judo has are being instilled on its members.
Excellent point. There's certainly a lot to be said about continuity there in terms of the legacy of the sport, as you mentioned, and the values as far as the sport goes. 1 second. Excuse me, the values as far as judo goes, I mean, we see them articulated in a lot of the content that's being put out by the IJF. They're really pushing the concept of their values, of the sport's values. It's more than a sport. It's excellent content. I just wanted to say that just to clarify, I think it's almost somewhat limited within the judo community as far as that content's reach, in the sense, you know what I mean? It doesn't get extended beyond that. Yeah. And it's not to say that other combat sports don't have values. They do, and they articulate them. But now it's more, we're living in a time, I think, where people are very organizations, et cetera, are really trying to kind of articulate what they stand for, right? And it's interesting when, as a fan of these combat sports, when you see you see this picture here, and you can see that judo has been consistently, articulating its values, and it's great to see that for the sport. I just think that that there are some, as far as the content reach, there might be some limitations, because some people are living in info silos. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where they're siloed off, and you know, if you're not going out of your way to inform yourself on other styles, you might not be seeing the whole picture. You know, you're only focused on, I want to learn judo just to improve my stand up, but not understand that judo also has more than stand up and throws, right? It's a complete art form. But anyways, I know we could go on and talk about that for probably another hour, and it would be you speaking, because you're very knowledgeable about this, and I really appreciate you know, the knowledge you're dropping out here, dropping them like some Uranagis on that 400-pound French dude from back in the day. That picture,
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, man. You know, it's funny. Whenever I think of when I think of Tony, I think of that picture. You know, like it's because there's this epic picture of you after you dropped that guy, the Uranagi. You got this intense look in your face. You know, it's like, man, that moment. I'm sure you also think about all the time, because that was. Go ahead.
Well,
sorry.
Most of the guys I fight with think about that when we're in the middle of Randori. Yeah. No, that's one of my biggest throws at the 2012 games when I caught the Frenchman in that Uranage. It was a beautiful throw, and it does get referenced a bit, and that is there's one really beautiful picture where I'm throwing him and he's in midair. So you're right, but I think the IGF is doing a good job on creating this content, but I think you're right. I think we need to find a way to push that content into more mainstream, because there's so many wonderful things that happen in the judo community, and there's so many and in Canada alone, there's so many great champions. Just last week, Jessica Caden-Cat got a bronze, Catherine Bushman-Pinard got a silver, Kyle Reese got a silver, and each one of them has such a spectacular backstory to their journey in judo. I mean, Jessica just fighting just to be able to get to Tokyo last summer, summer before last, sorry, because Krista Taguchi was #1 going in, and then Jessica goes to the Worlds and wins the Worlds, and then goes to Tokyo and wins a medal there, and not, it could not have happened to a nicer young lady. I mean, Jessica is one of the greatest ambassadors in Canada for judo. She did a clinic this summer at my club, and she was supposed to stay for only a few hours, do the clinic, and then she had another engagement. Her and her training partner had to get back to Montreal so she can prepare and train for these World Championships. But we had so many kids there that wanted her signature and wanted pictures with her. She stayed to the very last kid was done with a smile on her face and just showing off her medal and just talking. And it wasn't a rush job on anybody. It was, I'm there like looking at getting the phone on the time on my phone going, I know she's got to go. I know she's got to go. Can we get through all these people? And to her, this was the important thing in her next event. That will be the important thing when she gets to it. And it was just such a wonderful experience for all of those kids. And then I've heard similar stories of Catherine Bushman-Pinard, and I know Catherine Cat a little bit, and she's phenomenal ambassador of the sport as well. And I mean, Kyle's journey to the Worlds as well this year. I mean, Kyle's coming back after being our #1 way back in 2016. He grew up in Japan, dual citizenship, phenomenal judo player, and he got hurt in 2017, 2018. Shady El Nahas comes along and just blows up the judo world for Canada, placing 5th at the World Championships and then 5th at the Olympics. And Shady's going to be our guy for the future. And this summer at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, England, Kyle has to get a medal just to meet the standard to go to Worlds. And he ends up fighting Shady in the final and loses to Shady in the final, but gets that medal to make the standard and goes off to Uzbekistan for the World Championships last week, and does 5 different throws in 5 different fights to make the final. And he fights in Uzbeki in the final, and we all thought he had it won. There's 25 seconds left in the match, and the other guy's running away. And even Neil Adams, the great IGF commentator, says, "Oh, there's the final penalty. Canada's got our world champion." And then in sudden death overtime, Kyle just gets caught, and you know, I couldn't be more proud for somebody who had to reinvent themselves and come back on such adversity, knowing that Shady is the number one and Shady is the person that Canada supports right now. And all of a sudden, Kyle's the new guy, reinventing himself. So there's so many great ambassadors of judo in Canada like this, that, and they're just the nicest people in the world. We need all of those stories to get out there. And I know this interview here is about you hearing that I'm coming back to fight in Pan Ams and that, and that's why you've reached out. But I mean, there's so many amazing stories in judo in Canada that it all needs to get out. And I can tell you hundreds of them for the next 5 hours, and you'd run out of tape.
Dude, you're part of the story. You've got an amazing story, you know, and many fascinating chapters. In fact, I'm curious to know, you know, like, why did you retired from judo competition? You're jumping back into it one more time. This is technically your third comeback. What's motivated you to compete? What brings you back? And you know, tell us about the tournament, when it's happening, and you know, the preparation for it and all that.
So I'm not going to throw Sensei Andres, my coach, under the bus, because it's not him at all, even though my wife may be blaming him. So back in May, Canada was awarded the IBSA International Blind Sports Association Pan-American Championships. So Canada is going to host them in December in Edmonton. They're on December the 10th in Edmonton, Alberta. So Andres comes to me and he says that we've got them. Canada would like to put the strongest team forward. Can we put your name in as a competitor? You can come, show up, fight whatever division. You don't really have to do well. It's just the more names we have, the better. And I'm not the type of person that can just show up. So I thought about it, and then I reached out to him and I said, okay, I'll fight. But since judo has changed in the para world, there's no longer 7 weight divisions, there's 4. So because the classifications have changed, and let me give a little brief history on para judo so that everyone can understand. So in 2016, and everything prior to now, so every games prior to now, so Tokyo backwards, there was 3 different blind classifications in judo. They were called B1, B2, B3, and it depended on the level of blindness, but they all competed against each other. So that was a huge advantage for somebody with a B3 fighting somebody with a B1. Right. At the time, in 2016, I was a B1, and then I retired. So judo changed their classification. They said, you know what, we're going to get rid of the B3s. We're going to change it and call them Js, judo. And we're going to have a J1 and a J2. J1s will only fight with J1s. J2s will only fight with J2s. Well, in order to do this, we could not increase the number of participants at the Paralympics. So we had to decrease the number of divisions. So whereas before there used to be 7 men divisions and 6 women divisions, there are now 4 men, 4 women on each side. So 16 total divisions. On the men's side, there are 60 kilos, 73 kilos, 90 kilos, and heavyweight. So when I was asked to come and do this for Pan Ams, I was pushing that heavyweight mark, back in the old heavyweight mark. And so I said to him, I said, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this at 90 kilos. So this summer, I've set out on my diet, get back in shape, and pushing to hit that 90 kilo mark for December. I'm right on track. I'm actually in the 90s right now. Wow. So I will hit that 90 kilo mark probably 2 weeks to 3 weeks before the competition itself, which is great because it's giving me that leeway because I have to go away and coach at a couple of tournaments before that. So I'm going to have to modify training a little bit. So I've got such a nice leeway. My weight's dropping really well, and I won't have to actually cut. I'm just dieting naturally. So having said all of that, one of the factors in coming back is there's that J1 division. I've never had the opportunity to just have a division with people of my own sight. Since I've lost my sight, I've always had to fight against people that had more sight than I have had.
Right.
So any time in the past that I fought somebody that was a B1, I beat them. But then when I ended up fighting B3s, I sometimes win and sometimes lose. And that was the case in both London and in Rio. In London, I beat the B1, and then I lost to the two B3s. In Rio, I lost to a B3. I was winning, but I lost to a B3. And I would like to have a shot at doing a tournament where I get to fight J1s and to see where I could be at with that. Like, I know I'm no spring chicken anymore. The last time I fought these guys was 6 years ago, and I'm 49 now. So if I were to make that run to Paris, I'd be 51 at the Paris Games. And that's not a young man in judo, but I'm going to take it one tournament at a time. And I've been preparing for these Pan Ams with steadily increasing my physical training. My randori, which is sparring, has been going up. And that's played a big factor in me coming back to fight as well, is that I never stopped doing that because my fighters needed somebody really hard to fight against. So I would just continuously fight them. And I've been fighting them all along and doing well against guys that have gone off to nationals and taken medals. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I can do this. Like I can come back and I can see where I'm at. And if I do really well at Pan Am's, then maybe we'll try the World Cup circuit at the Paris side of it. And if that does well, maybe we'll take a run at Paris. And if I come back and I fall flat, then I know I've given it everything I can to come back, and I will be very proud of what I've done. I've always been very proud of what I've done in the past, and I'll be very proud of what I've done preparing for this competition and moving forward. But I'm also enjoying getting back in shape and fighting hard with the guys. And you know, those trainings, like we had a good 2-hour training this morning, and I came home from that training and I had trouble standing up after sitting down because we did a lot of quad work. And it's just it's nice to have those feelings again where you've just moved yourself to the brink of exhaustion and going that, yeah, at this age I can still train that hard.
It's incredible, man. But at the same time, as we were saying just before our interview, just before I hit record, we were chatting, and I was telling you that when I heard that you were getting back into competition, I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And in a way, I wasn't surprised, because from having, you know, interviewed and seen you train and so on, you know, you're a very intense competitor, you know, in the training. You the fire is burning, you know what I'm saying? Like you have the passion, man. You have the drive.
It's very hard to walk away from. I mean, yes, it's been 6 years, and my wife was reluctant to agree to me fighting these tournaments because of so many injuries I've had in the past and so much time away from family. But again, it's so hard to walk away from when you know you can still do it, when you know you can still make a run at it, or at least give it everything you've got to see if you can make a run at it. It is very, very hard to walk away, and I think it helps my kids too. Like if they see that I don't give up, then maybe in their head there is no give up. It's go, go, go. And if you fail, you fail, but you didn't give up.
That is it's a very important lesson to teach to kids, you know. And I mean, I could see what you're saying there in terms of instilling that sort of resilience and that determination. And I think, you know, it's as you were saying, it's hard to walk away from. You know, you've been involved in this sport for what, almost over 40 years now, right?
Yeah, 42 next month.
Man, and it's I think for people like yourself who've been involved, you know, training and competing at the highest level and so on. It's such a part of your identity, such a part of who you are. I'm sure you see judo everywhere. You dream judo, you know what I'm saying? Like it's you know, I think for anyone who's you know put in so much time and invested so much energy into their training, into themselves, and you sacrifice X, Y, and Z. It's one of those things that transitioning out of that, moving on from that is probably very, very challenging. Of course, you stay connected with your community. You're also coaching now. You've always been coaching, right? But I'm curious to know, how have you, in the last 6 years or so, how has your judo changed? Of course, you mentioned you've been competing in kata, but as far as your competitions, your approach to competing in judo, how has it evolved? How has it changed? What sort of techniques or throws and so on are you working? Tell us about that.
So my techniques actually haven't changed. I'm still the same technical type of fighter I was with the drop seinages, which are the shoulder throws, the makikomis, which are the winding throws, the aranages, which are the big counters. And I'm still the groundwork specialist I've always been, but I'm actually more technical. My throws are not as bulldog as they were before, because one of the things that I'm losing over time, and anybody who gets older knows this, is I'm losing some of that power I've had. I mean, I'm still strong. I'm still a very, very strong individual, as my fighters tell me. But I'm not that guy who can bench 400 pounds anymore. It's a little less than that now, and so I have to be more technical and a little bit more tactical when I train and when I go out to compete. So on my trainings now, I'm still training extremely hard, but I'm not doing as many randoris as I did, say, 6 years ago. 6 years ago, it used to be on average 30 a week at the highest level. Now I'm probably doing 12 to 14 at the highest level with full intensity in a week, just because the body can't take that much punishment as even it could 6 years ago. So I've had to be a smarter person training, a smarter person fighting. And then time management has to come into play a little bit too, because again, I do have the two kids, and 6 years ago they were quite young and weren't as involved in as many things as they are now. Now they're in judo, hockey, girl guides, and scouts, and so all these activities. It's a juggling show sometimes, and I'm at the dojo 6, sometimes 7 days a week for the different activities that I do at the dojo, in teaching, coaching, training, and the like. And with one driver in a household, so much ends up on Jackie's plate. And I think her biggest worry is that I come back into full-time competing again for the Paris Games, is that she becomes solo parenting for a majority of it again. And that's a very, very valid concern of hers. And I couldn't do half the things I do in judo without her support and without her. I know this, she knows this. I do believe everybody in the judo community, in the judo world, knows this, because I get patted on the back every day saying that not only did I score so far above my grade, that I'm very lucky she stays with me because of all the judo I do. But yeah, it's tough. It is, but again, you have to adapt and overcome all these different obstacles that maybe a 25-year-old or a 26-year-old doesn't have.
I think anyone who knows your story certainly knows, how incredible your wife is and how supportive she is. She's awesome, man, and
she is.
much respect to her, and she's been very supportive of you and the entire community. I think this is why. I mean, obviously when I heard that you were getting back into competition, I was like, very. I was happy for you, because I know as someone who's followed your story for many years now, I know that this is who you are. You're a natural born competitor in the sport of judo. You live for this. You know what I'm saying? And I'm curious to know, as far as we're talking about training at the dojo, and how your randori, you're going from 30 to 12 now, 12 sessions and so on a week. Who are you training with at the dojo? Who's the lead crew that's helping you out here?
So I actually it's actually a really great question because it's changed in the last few weeks. But at the beginning of well, some of the people that I coach and are training and have become training partners about, we have a heavyweight. And when I started coaching him and training him, I was a heavyweight as well back in the spring. He is the head instructor at the Uplands Judo Club. His name is Sebastian Godin, and he comes and trains on our randori night and our conditioning classes. And he went to nationals and got a bronze medal at nationals this year. He beat the national champion, and then it was reversed, and then he lost, and a whole story there. But yeah, he comes out and he trains on a regular basis with me and pushing me. I've got a number of brown belts that are my weight class that are out and pushing me and working with me. I have a national team member who fights in my weight class, who I'm coaching now. Big Mike, we call him, and he comes out to all our randori sessions and pushes me. But just recently, a name some of your listeners will know is living in Ottawa, not Montreal anymore, and has come and started to work with me and really help me. And it's actually somebody I've coached and somebody I've taught and somebody who grew up on the mat and I've known since he was a little kid. Ben Kendrick, Olympian Natalie Gosselin's son, and former national champion James Kendrick's son. So he comes out, and Ben himself is a multi-time national champion and world cadet bronze medalist. He's out every once a week with randori, and I do 3 to 4 sessions with him every week. And he's the one that's challenging me the most because I think last week when we fought, the score was 9-1 for him, 90 points for him and 1 for me. And I was so happy to get the 1. It's so great to fight with somebody with such high caliber that I'm able to find those mistakes I'm making and correct them. And Ben's judo is so phenomenal, and his attitude is just so respectful and so helpful on the mat. Again, I'm 6 years coming out of retirement, so with only 8 weeks left to prepare, he's been pushing me and helping me correct those mistakes really quickly. So it's been really, really great at the club having him and all of my fighters. Again, we're a community, and just to reemphasize that what judo is as a community. There's a brown belt at my club that helps take a lot of the weight off Jacqueline here, because he comes and picks me up and takes me to judo
Wow.
four times a week, and he trains obviously with us, and he'll be getting his black belt in December. But he drives, picks me up, drives me home, spends a lot of time like chauffeuring me around to the judo events I need to go to, because he knows that there's so many other responsibility that Jackie has, that this alleviates some of that pressure. And he loves to do, like, I'm not gonna say he loves to do it, but he never complains about doing it. And every time we try to buy him dinner or something, he's like, oh no, I love doing this, that's all great, I get to learn so much when I drive, and he trains me, and it's but I'm trying to go, what you're so great with us. And it's that's like judo becomes a family, and it's such a great place to be. And I know I segued out of your question, but yeah, we have so many great guys training with us at the club right now, and we have a couple of guys that have emigrated from Africa. One a 60 kilo, who some of your guys might know because he's pretty big in the BJJ world. Roderick Kuku. He's from Congo through South Africa to Canada. 66 kilo fighter, and he comes out, and I work with him just for foot speed, and it's been great having these high caliber guys on the mat that I can work with. I can help them from the knowledge base and the tactic base and the coaching base, and they get to help me with the physical base and getting the rust off the technique. So it's been really good.
That's awesome, man. And it's interesting. Like as you mentioned, it's a whole community. It's a big family, and everyone is supporting each other. And it's great to hear that, because I think that support is certainly needed. Everyone wants to learn, and and you're dropping the knowledge and you're sharing and you're coaching all that info. I'm curious to know, you had mentioned the topic of time management, right? In terms of preparation and planning and logistics and so on and so forth. And I actually had a question here in regards to that. If you don't mind, I want to go back to it because it's incredible, man. I mean, you're a very busy person, as you mentioned. You're a father of two. You've got a full-time job and career, and you're also coaching the sport. You're spending 7 days at the dojo. I guess, how do you find balance within all that? And you kind of you did answer part of that before, but I want to go back to it. How do you find balance, and what sort of tips and tricks do you have to share with others who, because you know everyone's busy, right? But then there's this sort of busy, which is just you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm hearing all this, and I'm like, good Lord, like, do you have a time to just chill out and do nothing, or is everything regimented and planned in advance?
Well, a lot of things are planned in advance, but I think, you know what, the number one thing, marry the most understanding person in the world. That's number one. But I guess that the best tip to give, I mean, 4 of the days I'm at judo, 4 of the days I'm at judo, I'm there with my kids for part of it. So my 10-year-old daughter now does kata as well. So she comes on kata night, and she works over on the side with another 10-year-old girl while I'm doing high performance kata. She's over learning and enjoying herself. And then I teach the kids class on Thursdays and Saturdays. So 2 of my kids are on the mat then. And then it's the same as when back in 2016, when you were following me around with a camera on Sunday mornings, both my kids come out on the mat, and instead of just running around like they did then, they now actually get to train a little bit and follow along with some of the exercises. So I get a lot of family time in with them there. We do a lot of family activities when we do have the free time. Like, we had family dinner tonight with my wife's family and with the kids, and we try to have dinner together and we do have dinner together almost every night at the table, the 4 of us, and we do talk about our day, and then either one kid goes off to one activity, I go off to judo, or we do separate for a time and then come back. And a lot of times 3 days of the week I come home and the kids are already in bed, and then I think that's the thing I feel the worst about is that 3 days of the week my wife puts the kids to bed and I say goodnight to them at like 6 o'clock at night or so. But the other 4 nights of the week I get to put them in bed, I get to tuck them in and the like. But I've also, I think COVID's really helped in my time management, because I have a government job, and most government employees are working from home, and I'm with my accessibility issues and my disability, I'll be working from home probably from now until the end of my career. So I have a nice setup, everything I need, all the accommodations I need here, but I'm also here when the kids get home from school. So I get to spend a couple of hours after school with them. We take the dog for a walk. We spend time together, and we get that family time in there too. And I'm kind of lucky with that. Also, I get to do a lot of my training at home as well. I mean, I have my stationary, I have my weights. So I'm able to do a lot of physical training at home, and then judo training on the mat and video review at home and the like. And it really is finding those brief times, those 30 minutes where you can get in a piece of training that you may not have been able to get in the day before. So like this afternoon, I was able to get in some mental training that was scheduled for yesterday, but we had an event yesterday, so I scheduled it for today. And things like that, where you get to adapt. And I think being a person with a disability, and yes, I got my disability a little later in life, but I've learned one of those tricks is you just have to adapt to whatever comes. Nothing's handed to you, and nothing that's worthwhile is ever easy, and we just make it work. And I think it's a lot on my wife's shoulders, and I'm never gonna I'm never going to deny that I'm very, very lucky in that respect, but my kids are great too. I mean, they help so much, and they're able to pitch in when necessary, and do not just chores at home, but ensure that when we get to the dojo, they're leaders on the mat. And I mean, they're only 10 and 8 years old, and they're already leaders on the mat, and that makes me so proud already. And I've already said to them, I mean, like, yes, they're going to be in judo their whole lives, but they don't have to be competitors. They're going to be whatever they want to be. And there's different avenues and different routes, and just because I'm a competitor doesn't make them need to be. And of course, my daughter stopped me and said, "Oh no, I'm going to the Olympics." And I'm like, that's your choice, and you want to put the hours and the sweat in, and I will be there to do whatever it is necessary to give you those opportunities. But it's not my pressure; it's your own. And that's I mean, I think my kids are like that, just naturally. They're naturally competitive. They're competitive with each other, and you don't want to see their chess games. They're very competitive with each other.
Nice. So they play chess as well, eh?
Oh, they play chess. They play cards. My 8-year-old is history buff. He's a big war history buff. You ask him anything about almost any of the wars of the past 500 years, and he'll tell you famous generals out of them, and he'll tell you famous battles. And it's yeah, he spends like a lot of time talking to the Alexa robot on just what happened here, what happened there, and he reads a lot of the my parents and my wife's parents get him a lot of the little war history books because that's what he likes to do. And my daughter likes reading a lot of novels, and so it's just great to have kids that are well-rounded and motivated to do the things that they want to do, and judo is just part of their life.
Of course, they're also seeing the fact that, you know, as a parent, you know, you're disciplined when it comes to your judo, you know what I mean? So the parents really set that example and the standard, you know, and they lead by example, by doing. So if they're around both of you guys and they see how you go about doing things, you know what I mean? It really instills these very important values for children as they develop. Tony, I appreciate your time. I have 2 more questions for you, and a lot of them are focused on advice. My first question is, as a judo coach now, what, and I know there's all sorts of different individuals who you coach, you know, people who are competitors, people who are recreational, you know, people who just want to lose weight, or people, you know, all sorts of people. What key advice do you have to share, I guess, in a scenario where people want to try the sport? What beginners, I guess, what's the key message that you share consistently with beginners in the sport?
So with judo, there's a difference between coach and instructor. So for some of those things, coaching is one thing, but instructing is what you're asking right now. And as an instructor, and people are joining judo, the most consistent thing I say to them is stick with it, because the early goings of judo are difficult. You're learning to fall down. You're learning to do something that goes against everything in your basic instinct, falling down and actually landing on your back and not your arms or your head, or stopping yourself with your hand or anything like that will injure you. But actually learning to fall, and it takes time, and it takes getting over a fear, and almost everybody has that fear of falling, because it is very, very nerve-wracking to just fall straight down. So we spend a lot of time on what's called ukemi, on break falls, on learning how to fall. And actually, I wrote a big paper on this about 5 years ago on why judo is great in Canada, and why judo is great for kids in Canada, mainly because we live in a winter country, and there's ice on the ground all the time. And I mean, I slip on that ice too. And when you fall on that ice, if you know how to break fall, you might get up and you might be a little sore and like a little wet and whatnot because you landed on ice, but you're not going to have broken bones, and you're not on your way to the hospital. and I see this every year. I see a number of people that slip and fall and have shattered elbows and shattered wrists and broken knees and legs and that, because that's the parts of their joints that they fall and land on. So I tell these people that join judo right away that it's going to take time. You're learning how to fall down. That's the most basic thing, and it is boring because it's repetitive. You're not learning the big flashy stuff. You're not learning a nugget. You're not learning drop tai toshi. You're not learning stuff that looks so big and so great that you've seen on TV. Like you're not learning Uchimata that you see Kyle did on the Georgian last week. You're not learning that right away. You're learning the other side of it. You're learning the fall. But when I explain to them, they're like, you live in Canada, you ever fell on the ice? And they go, yeah. I'm like, hurt, right? And they're like, yeah. I've had sore wrists and sore elbows and sore shoulders and this, that, and the other thing. And I say to them, well, you learn how to fall. You slip on the ice. You're going to do these break fall by you're just going to do it. It's going to become automatic because that's what you do. And then you're going to get up, you're going to dust yourself off. You're going to be, I'm great. And there's going to be like no injury. And once you explain that to them, they get that aha moment and they're like, oh, I should have started this so many years ago. And they actually start to bring their kids into it. And it's so great. So the biggest piece of advice to start judo is stick with it. Because the first 3 months are hard because you're learning to fall. And they're psychologically hard because you're getting over that fear of falling. Everybody has it. And then it is boring for the first 3 months because you're learning to fall. You are learning throws and you are learning hold down and you're learning some other stuff, but the majority of your time is, and you've gone through this yourself, Garmamie, the majority of your time is you're learning to fall down. But once you get over that hump, then you start to learn the exciting stuff, the fun stuff, the stuff that you saw on TV, the stuff that brought you to the club because you wanted to do these things. But you got to get over that first initial 3 months where it is repetitive and you're getting over that fear of falling and you're learning to do it. And it's over and over and over again. So that's the first piece of advice I give somebody joining judo. And really to all the people that you have listening, like if you are looking for a martial art and you are looking for a sport to get into that's going to help you get in shape, but it's also great for Canadians that live in a winter country. I mean, judo does give you that added bonus of you are learning to fall down. You are learning to do a skill that you need to do in this country because every single Canadian has slipped on the ice. I mean, it's if you live in Ottawa and you haven't slipped on the ice at least 4 times in one winter season, you haven't left the house. So it happens, and that's the thing. So yeah, it's so many life benefits to joining judo, and to me, that's a huge one. And then there's also that camaraderie, the community, all that other stuff, which we at my club at Takashi Dojo, nobody gets isolated. Everybody that comes into the club is introduced to everybody else and brought into the conversations in the locker room, is brought into the conversations on the mat. It's helped. The higher belts go and help them. They feel like they belong from day one. There's no, oh, you're the white belt, you go over there and work with that person. It's no. We're going to do something a little more advanced, but here's what you and I can work on right now. And then you're going to get to this part, but you know what? Come and see what we're doing. And then we'll work on this. And then we'll get you to that eventually. And then we'll have conversations with them. We'll invite them to conditioning classes. I mean, they feel like they're part of that community and that family from day one. And I know this happens at almost every judo club because it's not something that we just thought of. It's something that we learned ourselves and we were part of, and Takashi family was part of, and other dojos that I've been to behave the same way, and it's part of that judo philosophy, and it's part of that judo principle, and it's part of that judo life. So like there's so many benefits to joining judo, but again, to answer your question, the advice I give is to stick it out for the initial difficult, boring part, and then you'll love it.
Fascinating point. Thank you very much. One last question for you. What's the best advice Andres Sasandé's ever given you?
Oh, gosh. You know what? I think I would have to say the best advice coach has ever given me is to now that is putting me on the spot because
sorry, I know there's a lot.
There's so much. I mean, and I said this today too, because Sensei Sadash is running a coaching course in November, and some of my students, I've made them sign up for it today. I said this today, and I saw Sensei Andres yesterday. He is the best coach in the country. Not the best para coach, not just the best person to teach in a coaching course. He is the best coach in the country, because what he does is he analyzes your judo and he adapts the strategy you need to take in your fights to what your capabilities are. So he doesn't try to give you a whole new judo. He takes what you have and he makes it better. And I've said this many times on a lot of the interviews with you, is that 3 words from Sensei Andres on the mat will change your judo, because he makes minor little tweaks to what you do today to make it better. And he has such an awareness of everything that's going on around him in judo that it's phenomenal. And he is the hardest working person in judo, and one of the friendliest people in judo too. Like he's a phenomenal individual. He is the reason I got into para judo, because I thought my judo career was over in 2009 when my eyesight dipped so low that I couldn't do able-bodied judo anymore. And I've told you this story many times before, but maybe some of the viewers haven't watched back on the past episodes. I was running a coaching course with Sensei Andres. I was assistant on a coaching course, and I used this big magnifier to go over my portion of the course that I was about to instruct on. And Sensei Andres asked, what is that? And I said, well, it's a magnifier, because my eyesight is not dipped to where, at that point, now it's gone totally, but at that point it had dipped to where I needed to magnify it up to about a 60 or an 80 font to just go letter by letter and read out what I needed to do and memorize it. So he said, well, how bad is your vision? And when I told him how bad my vision is, he basically just said, well, you're fighting again. And I laughed. I said, oh, I don't think so. And this was back in 2010. And he said, no, you're now coming on a para judo team and you're going to fight the para judo team. And 4 months later, I fought the Para Pan-American Championships in Orlando, and I won the heavyweight and the open weight division there. And then that just set me off to Pan Am Games bronze medalist and 7th place at the London Games. So it was just from that one little happenstance where Sensei Andres knew I had bad eyesight, but he did not know just how bad it was, to him saying, you're fighting again, to me being a competitor again, and that first comeback or second comeback we were talking about. So it's just, yeah, it is he is such a unique individual, and there's so many stories I can tell you about him and me and him and Priscilla, him and coaching a number of other amazing athletes and medalists. And I'm blessed to have had him and still have him, because he's now my coach again, as a coach and as a mentor. So it's hard to just pick one piece of advice, because my judo is where it is. And I say this a lot too. The fact that I'm wearing a red and white belt now is in large part to Sensei Andres. It's in large part to the Takahashi family, a large part to Sensei Andres. I think my wife owns a part of it as well. And I think I have the very smallest part of it.
You know, it's really interesting when you speak about coach, and the thing too is I'm just listening to you to talk about this, and I'm thinking to myself, you guys should almost do a series of interviews where you're talking to each other and you're recording it, you know, to post somewhere and to share it, because you guys clearly have a lot of knowledge, of course, when it comes to the sport, but you have a bond, you know, when it comes to the sport, and I'm sure that there's a lot of interesting exchanges you would have in that session. A while back, I went back and I listened to an interview I did with him, and you know, you're right. He's you know, I don't know him that well. You know, I've spoken to him, of course. I've interacted with him. I know who he is and all that, I went back to that interview and I was listening, and the word you used there, unique, is definitely a key word to describe this individual. He's a very fascinating person, you know, and you know what I'm saying, like just from my interactions with him and just hearing his approach on how he's very direct and so on. Anyways, I can appreciate all that is what I'm saying, and I can.
Oh yeah, he's a very phenomenal. He's a very phenomenal coach. He's a very phenomenal person. He has so much knowledge on so many different subjects. I mean, I can remember a number of trips with him where we've talked about like the Ottoman Empire. Like he has a wealth of knowledge on a lot of topics, and in my opinion, the most knowledgeable person in judo when it comes to coaching, preparing, and developing athletes for judo.
Well, Tony, thank you very much for this time here. We went initially, I was thinking 60 minutes, but I think we've gone over to 80 minutes, which is all good, of course. And I'm obviously we'll be speaking again. I'm hoping to interview you again after the tournament. Just just for you to update us on how things went and so on. And yeah, all the best to you, man. And you know, coming up soon, you'll be competing, and I'm sure you're going to do great. So, all the best in your training, my friend.
Well, thank you, my friend. It's always nice to talk to you. I'm hoping someday soon to see you on the mat again. But it's always great to talk to you, and I love listening to your podcast. It's
you listen to it? You listen to it?
Of course I do.
Oh wow!
Of course I do.
You know, it's so funny because on my end, I just do these interviews, and I'm like, is anybody even listening? You know, I don't know.
I always put a nice big heart too on Facebook with each one. I get on the bike and I've got them running. I got them playing. You do such a spectacular job. But again, like I'm a fan of combat sports. I'm a fan of martial arts. I'm a fan of athletes in sports. So, and you ask so many terrific questions, and you delve into so many terrific topics, and it's great to follow, and I think it helps the community as a whole, because yeah, my community is judo, but I'm certain there's a number of people out there that do other martial arts, and I know this because we've had them come to our club. We've had BJJ fighters come and improve their groundwork with us, because BJJ fighters, they do phenomenal groundwork, but they do a lot of closed guard, and we do a lot of closed guard passes, and we do a lot of techniques that have, because BJJ evolved from Gracie Judo, we have a lot of techniques that did not evolve with it, that we find a lot of people see Travis Stevens do, and they want to come and learn from a club. As you know, Travis was such a phenomenal BJJ fighter because he did a lot of techniques that aren't taught in BJJ. They're taught in judo. So a lot of these BJJ fighters have picked up on that. So they started coming to some judo clubs and going, can you teach me how to do this? And of course we say, yes. And then I know a lot of judo players who want to get extra, there was a groundwork fighting, they go off and work at BJJ clubs because they get in that extra couple of rounds. Right. And they just say to the BJJ fighters, no ankle or wrist locks, please, because I'm a judo fighter, but we can do everything else. And I've done that on occasion quite a few times with a few BJJ clubs here in Ottawa. So it's almost the same type of community, but it's a bit of cross training, and it's great. So I'm hoping some of your listeners that want to try judo come and try judo, or some of your listeners that are in the BJJ world that want to come work on their takedown and their groundwork, come check out the club. We have a phenomenal club here in Ottawa.
Takahashi Dojo, man. Find it online. Check it out. Make sure you follow them on Facebook and Instagram. Tony, thank you very much, my friend. We'll be speaking to you soon.
My pleasure, Garmamie. Nice to see you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.